Welcome back to Gooner Pavilion, and this one is tough. Arsenal's Champions League run is over. Defeated by PSG in the semi-finals, and now the narrative has turned. Pundits, fans, and even some Arsenal fans are calling the season a failure. But I want to step back. I want to look at the psychology. I want to look at the progress. I want to look at why this season, despite the heartbreak that we've just suffered, is not a failure. It's easy to label a season based on just the last fixture, but I think this is where emotion is separated from the truth. Perspective, always perspective. Guys, let's dig into this. Of course, it hurts. We're one game from the final, one dream away from Munich. And people are saying Arteta is deluded. Jamie Carragher called him out. Memes are flying, banter is loud. Some of that is fair, right? This is football. We love to take a dig. Who hasn't enjoyed, what has been happening across the road to Spurs? They've had one of their worst seasons in a long time. Of course, we love to laugh at Manchester United. Look at how far they've fallen in terms of where they were in being the giants in football. Look at Chelsea, started like a house on fire and completely been pulled down to earth. We've seen, lots of big teams. Look at Man City, absolutely fall off a cliff. As fans, we love that. We love the banter, and all of that is good. But I think for Arsenal fan, I think this is where you hold perspective. This entire season has not been a failure. And when we start to say that, I think that's when we lose the plot. Because failure isn't falling short, it's actually standing still. And I think this team is far from that. And I'm going to show you why in the next couple of minutes. Okay, look at where we were 3 seasons ago, battling for fourth, fifth, hoping for scraps. Now we're here, Champions League semi-finals, pushing Manchester City, pushing Liverpool to the brink at the highest level with a squad that is still developing. Arteta has changed the culture, he's changed the philosophy, changed the football, and no, he hasn't won silverware, but he's built a team that can challenge. You don't build a dynasty by skipping steps. You absolutely don't. And the best example is the NFL. You all know I love the NFL. And I often look across the pond and I look at, some of the things that I've seen in teams that have become dynasty. We're talking about the New England Patriots. And right now we're talking about Kansas City Chiefs. You do your work, to change the trajectory and the fortune of the team. You draft well. Kansas City Chiefs, we look at Kansas City Chiefs right now. We look at them and what they've been able to do in the last couple of years. It started with drafting Patrick Mahomes. You've got to get that draft right. And then you've got to have veteran players who would help to sort of elevate that. So you've got drafting, you've got your veteran players that comes in, then you've got to have a good coach. You've got to have a coach that is able to take everything and mix it together and actually succeed. If you look at Andy Reid in the NFL, he used to be with the Philadelphia Eagles. And he got so close, but never able to move over and cross the hump. And there's a lot of similarities I can see right now with the growth that Arsenal is taking. We're buying some decent players. We're having, veteran players coming in. You've got the likes of Jorginho. You've got the likes, of Thomas Partey, who's a veteran now. You've got, players like, Miles Lewis Kelly coming in. This is like your draft process. You're going through, your young players, bringing them in. Waneri stepping up. You got Saka absolutely becoming a very, important player for Arsenal. And then you've got a coach that is now building brick on brick, building a squad that not only is one of the squads that are producing performances, but they are challenging consistently year on, year on. And excuse me, and I think that in itself cannot be underestimated. I think this campaign, teaches us how to lose. And you say, why does that matter? I think you will find that a lot of the big clubs, they learn a lot from disappointment. They learn from disappointment, they reload. Look at Real Madrid, even look at PSG that we've just played in the Champions League semi-final. Look at how many times PSG has come close. Remember, they had all the stars, within PSG. They had Mbappe, they had Messi, they had everyone, but they still couldn't win the Champions League. And now it seems like they're going to get close. It remains to be seen whether they will actually win it. But just imagine all the disappointment that has been in a team that have had all kinds of top managers, going to PSG and still not able to deliver it. It just shows you how hard it is to actually get to these levels in the Champions League. And Arsenal, barely in the Champions League, and in 2 seasons of their return, they've hit the quarterfinals, they've hit the semifinals. I think that's something to be content with. And I know a lot of the people are not going to be talking about this element. Of course, the hurt and the pain is real. Arsenal have just suffered a massive defeat, and the hope was high. I was one of those that was hoping that we were going to turn this around. But when you come into a game and you have an informed, player like the goalkeeper playing, in the form of his life, he was saving everything. I mean, some of the saves that Donnarumma have had in this Arsenal tie versus PSG on both legs. I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't win, goalkeeper of the tournament. I think he's a shoe-in for me right now. And also, I wouldn't be surprised if his name is called out at the end when the honors are being given, talking about Ballon d'Or and stuff like that, because, some of the things that he's done in the Champions League is absolutely, absolutely ridiculous. And it really shows you at both ends how the differences are. And I was talking to some, friends over chat yesterday, and then I still maintain it. For me, Raya is a good player, but I'm not quite sure he's quite at that level. I mean, when you watch those two goalkeepers and see what goes on there, I think that, it just shows you where you can potentially be when you want to go in and win the big honors. But I think all of that, is in context, of what this Arsenal team has become. And this season has been very unusual. It's been an unusual season. Look at Man City dropping off the cliff, right? We've seen the rise of Nottingham Forest battling for Champions League places. We've also seen the likes of Manchester United and Tottenham absolutely falling off, having a disastrous season by their own standards as well. And then we've seen Chelsea. We've seen what's happened there. It's also been an unusual season for Arsenal. It's very, very rare where you have a situation where you have almost your top key players absent for a significant period of time during the season. We're talking about Saka. We're talking about Ben White. We're talking about Jesus. We're talking about Havertz, much maligned Havertz. We're talking about Odegaard. And yes, have Odegaard and Saka have returned, but I think everyone knows that they're not absolutely right there at their best right now. The injuries have taken a toll out of them. We've also had the best defender that we've had this season, Gabriel. We lost the defender at the time of the season where you need to have everyone fit. It's been a combination of so many things, and yet still, Arsenal were competing for two major trophies going into the final month. And yes, you can say that the league has faltered, and Liverpool have won it as a canter, and Arsenal have just had this disappointment. But I still think that the manager has done something remarkable in terms of being able to squeeze out the most out of a squad. that I think at the start of the season, I don't think a lot of people will be looking at all of these Arsenal players, and saying that everyone, maybe apart from Saka, that universally everyone believes is the world class player. I think there were still debates about, Saliba and Gabriel by a lot of people. I think there's still debates about Odegaard by a lot of people, Martinelli. Even Declan Rice, people were talking about the fact that he hasn't really, really stepped up, and shown off that 100 million. And Arteta has been able to squeeze out the most from these players. And hey, listen, coming from someone who's not exactly an Arteta fan, and this is not something that I've hidden. If you watch all my videos in all the different channels I've been involved in, you will know that I have this perspective about him. But I cannot deny what has happened in Arsenal. I cannot deny, what has gone on in the last couple of months. Criticism is loudest, when progress is on. And for Arsenal fans, don't let the noise, drown out the truth. Let the people cook, the timeline cook, people joke, but if you're an Arsenal fan, I urge you to hold the perspective. Now, let's talk about Mikel Arteta, right? Some fans have gone wild, right? They want him gone. They absolutely want him gone. I was seeing some videos and people are ranting and raving. And yes, that is always, going to draw a lot of emotions. And you can guess all the medias are gonna pile on, in the next couple of days. Um, but I've had my doubts, like I've said, about Arteta. Never hidden that. But I think that what he's built here deserves respect. I think out of anything, he deserves respect. And I think he deserves, to be given time and investment to actually push us over the line. I feel that we're not far off. We need that striker. And yes, I know what Mikel Arteta has been saying all season, and I'm sure he has to say that because for the manager to concede and say, "Oh, we don't have a striker," and all of that is going to be the reason why we don't achieve, is putting your excuses up front. But I think even he will recognize, and he said it in a lot of subtext, is that there are moments that decide a game. And again, his post-match conference after this game really says a lot if you're listening to what he's saying. It's the difference at the boxes, right? The difference at the boxes was the key. And what is it that happens at the boxes? You either score goals or you stop goals. And for us, we couldn't do both, quite well in this tie against PSG. That will give you a clue for me in terms of where I think the investment will be in the squad, going into next season. I think that I would not be surprised if Mikel Arteta even still invests in the defense. I wouldn't be surprised. Think about players that are potentially going to depart. Zinchenko, we know is going. Tierney is also, we know that is going as well. It will leave a number of gaps, and especially with the way that injuries have happened for Arsenal, I think he wouldn't want to be caught short there. So I would not be surprised if there is an investment in defense. I know everyone is talking about upfront. I believe that this is the time that Arsenal goes and makes that statement. And I will push whatever it is to go and get Isak. I think that you get Isak, you bring him into a team like Arsenal. I think that he would be the same impact as what Mo Salah is having in likes of Liverpool. They are different players. Now, the only thing for me is that I don't know about Isak when he comes under pressure. It seems like a daft thing to say, but there is a difference when you're playing for, all respect to Newcastle. You play for Newcastle and you're banging in all the goals. I'm playing for a team where there's a lot of expectation. And expectation with Arsenal is not because they've been recently winning, it's because of the history of the club. It's because of what Arsenal have done in the past. So you're always more scrutinized. Arsenal games get more televised, in the league. Of course, other games get televised, but everyone, if there is a game that Arsenal is playing, it's more likely for Arsenal to be shown on TV. Why? Because Arsenal is always contending, at least in the last couple of years, with all the major trophies. So I don't know whether when the growing is tough, and there will be tough times in Arsenal, whether Isak has got that mentality. He can score goals, nothing against that. He can finish the ball in the back of the net, absolutely, and we need that. But I think we found out that this game is also not just about talent. It's also about what you got up there. It's also about that psychology. It's also about how you respond in adversity. And if not anything, it's the one thing that I feel like club has built into Liverpool, that even Slot will be hard pressed to get rid of that. I'm not even sure he can get rid of it, because I think it's now in their DNA. Remember, the lessons of failure that they had, the Champions League finals they got to and lost, only for them to reload, restock, and go again. I think that, for these players, it's time for Arsenal to go out there and invest in the squad. And I think that they will. I think that they will. I think that you've seen a clear path in terms of how we can actually win um, medals and things like that. We just have to put it all together. Now, I know this has been a long one, but I wanted to really just kind of step back a little bit and just talk, based from a place of, maturity, a place of where, I just wanted to just talk about, a reflection, on what this game means and the disappointment. And then hopefully, you guys can resonate with what I'm saying. And if you like what I'm saying, hit that like and subscribe button. I think that this pain should be a push for Arsenal. You know, I know everyone's got the banter, it's always about next season, but it really is about next season for Arsenal. I think it's a time that you've got a structure, you've got a culture of what you want to have in a team like Arsenal. I think now it's time for us to go and get it. I think it's time for us to go and get it. And I absolutely believe that the Arsenal hierarchy are going to look at what has happened this season, and they're going to go again. And I think Arsenal fans should hold the perspective. Don't look at the last results or even the last month to reflect on what has been an extraordinary season for Arsenal. I think that this team is very close, very, very close to a silverware, and all of the pain will soon be forgotten. Remember, hit that like and subscribe button. Appreciate all of you. Let me know what you think. Do you think Arteta's reign for Arsenal is done? What should Arsenal do in the transfer window to kick on? How can we take this defeat and turn this into something positive? Remember, like I always say, come here for the Arsenal, stay for the family. Let's go. Come on, you Arsenal.